You're rolling, by the way.
Hey, welcome back to the Twin Ports Real Estate Show. Jim Ronding, Gary Gallagher here from RE/MAX 1. All right, Gary, we've got Duluth Mayor Don Ness as our special guest. We've been talking about the report that the City of Duluth put out, the 2012 Housing Indicator Report. And I think indicator is a big thing. I mean, we're talking about how this is going to be used in the future and how it's going to be used to attract new investment and maybe some positivity, to Duluth and the Twin Ports, and I think it's a real big help. One thing you said on the last break that caught me, and I never thought of this, you were saying that developers are being lured out to North Dakota. Now, I know several people that work out in North Dakota. They go out there for a week to 10 days, and then they come back for 3 or 4 days. But I never thought of that. So, is it significant? You lost, people who are really to take out and develop.
Yeah, I think it's the folks that have those particular skills, and carpenters can go out there and they're building hotels and they're building condos and they're building housing as quickly as they can put it up. And so when you have a market that hot and folks that want that kind of northern United States experience, and they can go out and make a whole lot of money versus being in a housing market that, while we see those early signs that things are recovering and there's opportunity there, it still can't compare to how hot it is out in North Dakota. So that is a challenge, and we need to start rebuilding that capacity here locally, and that's going to take time. But, if you can have that slow, steady growth, that's what can sustain the industry.
And then going back to some of the housing things that people are looking for here in building a new housing stock, I think one of the issues that we see here locally is you've got high-end houses, say over $300,000. Mm-hmm. You seem to have some new houses, some availability of that, but not the ability for people to purchase those things. So getting these new housing stocks in here and keeping the price point, say $250, Jim, right in that range.
Right.
That, to me, would seem like a very good, stable price point based on the people that are coming in here locally. Mm-hmm. And it would be so nice to see some of these houses going up here, Jim, that we have seem to have a demand for, as well as trying to temporarily house some of these folks that come in with some good quality rental housing.
Yeah. And, we have to look at that housing ladder, how people kind of progress up that ladder throughout their lives and throughout their careers, and there's some missing rungs right now. The college kid who gets the job working at Maurice's, and they're making $40,000-$50,000, but they have $50,000 in student loan debt, and their credit may not be good, and the banks are a little skittish about giving them that loan. How can that person start to gain the equity so that they can then buy their starter home maybe in 5 years? And I've had this idea of a starter condo concept in which somebody in that scenario could buy, maybe it's a $50,000 to $80,000 one-bedroom apartment, and have a 10-year mortgage on that over the course of 5 years they can build $20,000, $30,000 in equity that they can then take to buy their first real home. The other missing rung is getting from that starter home, that home from $100,000 to $150,000 that a lot of younger professionals are in. How do you get them then to that next one? And we have this gap that I see, it's almost $150,000 to $250,000, that there's not a whole lot of real quality housing options in that. Once you get above $250,000 and into the $300,000s, a lot of really nice homes, but how do you get that person into the larger home that they can build up some equity quicker so that they can then move into the $350,000 home?
One of the things that also intrigued me in this report was we'll go to the college students here. We've got 86,000 people locally here in Duluth. And I did not realize that the student population levels were over 24,000 students here annually based on the report. And so you bring that many people, and all of a sudden we've got over 100,000 people in this community for 9 months out of every year. That's a pretty big increase in the population levels. And some of the housing issues that we've seen locally with the rental, and let's say the college students here, have seemed to have abated here over the last couple of years. What's your sense in terms of housing for college students? And the rental market seems to or not the rental market, but the rental issues here with the college students really have seemed to to kind of settle down here recently with the most recent legislation that we've had.
Yeah, I think you're right. And, I think there's many factors. And college students really skew numbers in a lot of different ways. And, college students have the option in the census to either be counted locally or back home. And there's a real mix and match. So how do you get an accurate figure on how many of those college students are reflected in 86 and how many are living here most of the year but not being counted? So they also skew income numbers because you have a big population and they're not making a whole lot of income. They're technically in poverty, but they're college students. And but I think you're right that in the problems associated with housing students have been mitigated. They're lessened. Part of it is the enforcement side. The police have been taking a more active role, really cracking down on some of the parties and the disturbances in the neighborhood. That's a big piece of it. There's nothing wrong with having college students in the neighborhoods. It's the disturbances that create the problems. I think some of the new development that Lambert has been doing and others are also taking some of that direct pressure off of the traditional neighborhoods. And you want to have that healthy balance. You want to have single-family rentals. You want single-family home ownership and having college students as well. And if you have a healthy balance, it can be a really vibrant neighborhood. You start to get out of balance, and then you're going to create some problems for the people who are in the smaller percentages.
Now, what do you say to somebody like Mark Lambert that has invested tens of millions of dollars here over the last 10 years with the facilities that he's built here when nobody else was? What do you say how do you embrace somebody like that? What do you say to a guy like that?
Yeah, you say thank you. Thank you for having the confidence and optimism in the city of Duluth. And, you go back 25 years, and the only people making investments in the city of Duluth were A&L Development. They were the only game in town. Now you're seeing, George Sherman and Mark Lambert and, some of the folks that built the Firehouse Flats. And you're seeing more interest from developers seeing Duluth as a good investment and putting some major private equity into our market. And the only reason that they do that is that they see Duluth as a good investment and that they're going to make money on it. So, but you need those folks that are on the front end, like the Lamberts and like the Shermans and like the A&L, who can prove the model can work to then give the confidence to the next developer to come in and make hopefully that same type of investment.
You're talking about projects that are both under construction and there's a lot of projects that are probably coming up, and why don't you remind some of the viewers of some of the projects that are coming up that maybe you're most proud of or you're loving, you're looking forward to seeing being developed?
Well, the one that I'm most excited about is our downtown corporate tower, the 425 building. The city, Maurice is putting in $30 million of their own equity into this structure. It's going to be a signature piece for our downtown. And again, a project of that size and scope doesn't happen in a community unless people are optimistic about our future. Some of the other, hotel developments, the project down at Bayfront is gaining momentum, and I think will be underway this year. Some exciting investments in our downtown, and hopefully people see the need out there on the apartment building and the townhomes, and will take advantage of that with some private investment. We're close on a couple of them, but people haven't yet pulled the trigger.
Can you see the Bayfront? Let's say Georgia Pacific wasn't there. What could you vision developing, how to develop that westward? Could you see any like that occurring in terms of like we tear down that industry, not that we don't need it, but we get rid of it and we develop it as part of a Bayfront master plan? Wouldn't that be cool?
Well, it would, but, I think that it's important to retain that land for industrial purposes. I mean, one of the things that we've seen in our economic development efforts, trying to bring in those manufacturing jobs, is one of the limitations that we have is the availability of industrial sites, and especially those that either have shipping or rail availability. The Georgia Pacific site has both. That makes a very valuable site. And it's been frustrating that Georgia Pacific hasn't been willing to work directly with us, but we're hopeful that a sale will happen quickly and put it into the hands of a developer who actually wants to see activity happen on that site. And because, those industrial sites bringing in that industry, those manufacturing jobs are what's going to then drive the health of the housing market.
And I think you have what I think is a good point about all of that is that, it's all eggs in one basket. You've got to have more than one avenue of jobs. The tourism is really strong, but you need that manufacturing base. And, I read about them in particular, and they're kind of vague about what's going on. Just a personal question is, are they really trying to attract a buyer, or is this kind of on the shelf until somebody gets around to it? Because that's the way it seems to me.
Yeah, they put a whole lot of restrictions and conditions on a potential buyer, and so I think the most likely route that they're going to go is to sell it to somebody who will kind of take it for scrap, pull out all the machinery, sell that out, take down some of the metal buildings, sell that for scrap, and kind of get it down to the basics, and then start marketing it to
as the property.
Yeah, as the property to come in. And unfortunately, we had some local interests and folks that the city was working with that were willing to come in and use the equipment and use the facility as it was designed for. But Georgia Pacific said any company that competes with Georgia Pacific and their 30, 50, 100 different companies and product lines, they wouldn't allow to come into that site. So, they're a huge corporation. They don't care about the city of Duluth. So the quicker that we can get out of their hands and into a developer who is incentivized to bring in new activity, the better. Yeah,
I agree with that. I think that that was the attitude that came out to me in the paper too. All right, let's move back into housing. I was looking at the report, and foreclosures are down, and it's an interesting report because in it states that the foreclosures have been tracked since 2005. And for example, in 2005 there were 75 foreclosures in the city of Duluth. And we're at a high of 2010. It looks like 270. So that's pretty big. Mm-hmm. But in 2012, and I hope I can read this. Wait till you get a little bit older and your eyes don't work as well. Down to 150. Mm-hmm. Serious reduction. And Gary and I have talked about feeling that. That we feel. We see foreclosures, but we just feel like there's not as many. And the ones that are out there, I think, are being picked off faster and faster. Mm-hmm. So what are your comments on the foreclosure picture?
I think we're fortunate that we didn't go through the same foreclosure hit as a lot of other communities, especially, ex-urban communities or Twin Cities communities that saw much higher percentages of foreclosures than we saw. And that's because our market didn't overheat in the same way as some of those other communities, and it is encouraging to see the decline, that they're not staying on the market as long, that the banks seem to be a little bit more willing to turn these things around more quickly.
They're figuring it out.
yeah, finally, right? And because that's the health of the neighborhood. When you have a foreclosed market in a neighborhood, it depresses everybody else's ability to sell a house nearby.
That's a point that we've been preaching for many years. It's like, a foreclosure, the value of it can ruin a neighborhood, mm-hmm. And I think that people are starting to realize now, that with fewer and fewer foreclosures, that they are starting to remember that is just going to be temporary. And mm-hmm. it's such a strong point that the foreclosure, they're down. Mm-hmm. So
that's a recorrection. It's a correction in the market, and the valuation is, when you're underwater and people they're getting advice, just walk away from your home. And now that values are starting to come up, somebody still may be struggling to pay their mortgage, but at least the value, they can see the value to what they still owe is a little bit more on par. So it doesn't it's not as clear that the foreclosure route is the right way to go.
The other thing we've done here locally, Mayor, is we've started to tackle blight. Houses that have impacted neighborhoods in a negative way, and we've started to, ramp up the process to eliminate some of these properties. And most notably, we have the property on Lake Avenue and A Street and
mm-hmm.
Masaba and Lake Avenue there, and that had been sitting, I think, since I was a young kid. And
mm-hmm.
to see that finally come down, and the other thing is when you drive up there now, you go by and it's like it was never there. Mm. And you look at that small little lot that this house sat on, and every time you drove up there, it really was a big eyesore. Mm-hmm. And there's been a couple of other properties that have been demolished by the city to start combating blight, What do you see in terms of blight, in terms of the ability for the city to continue to move down the road of taking down houses should they have these negative impacts and the owners refuse to do anything with them?
Yeah. Well, I wish we could do more because there are, unfortunately, too many property owners that just sit on these properties for much too long, and they become, blight on the community and depress the home values in the same way as a foreclosure does. And so it was nice to see, there's all sorts of reasons why not to take down a home like the one up on Mesaba Avenue, and we saw a lot of those barriers, but then if you're committed enough to see it through, it does happen. And I have to tell you, the neighbors are just absolutely thrilled not to have to look at that. And a lot of the commuters are thrilled as well, not to see it on the way to work.
All right, folks, we got to take a break. We're going to be right back. You're tuned in to the Twin Ports Real Estate Show with our special guest, Duluth Mayor Don Ness.